So this is not exactly how I was planning to start doing these videos, but since we are at a time in which plans do change, and so many people are having to work from home right now, which is a hard thing to do. And I have some information and some tips for that, relying on both the principles of workflow and on my own experience since I've been working from home a lot over the last 25 years or so. So I feel that this is urgent information to get out there to people right now. And so, if the sound or the editing are not as great as I would have liked them to be, you know what? I think for now, it's fine. Because I just want to get this information, this advice out there to, those of you who need it, and maybe help ease some of the strain of these very strange and very stressful times. Um, Before I go into the actual advice, though, I want to tell you this thing. If you're finding it hard to be productive working from home, if you're procrastinating, if you find it hard to focus, if you feel super tired all the time, you are not alone. And don't be too hard on yourself because working from home by yourself is a challenge for almost everyone. We are biologically programmed to function in a society of other people, to be activated by the need to impress other people,
Are you ready?
I was born ready.
to not disappoint other people, to not look bad to other people.
You're stuck.
Stuck? Nah, what? Stuck? Nah.
These things are important motivators for us as humans. And when that social structure of immediate carrots and sticks is gone, it's not your fault if you find it hard to be motivated and to stay on track. All right? So, since we are in this strange reality in which a lot of us who might not be used to it are forced to work from home for a while at least, here are 3 tips for staying productive and sane when working from home. Tip number 1 has to do with the way you structure your day. Now, I think that for a lot of people, the instinct is to try and recreate the 9 to 5 model at home. And if that works for you, that's fine, that's great. But you know what? It never worked for me. And honestly, I don't know of very many people, at least in the creative industry, that have been successful in doing that, at least for a long period of time. And if you think about it, once again, we're not really built for this, for a 9 to 5 job. In fact, the 8-hour work week that we know today only started around 100 years ago. If you were a farmer or an innkeeper in the 1700s, work and life were not really separate things. You did what you had to do when you had to do it. The 9 to 5 thing is a compromise that started when humans suddenly started working away from home. So to me, it makes very little sense to use that compromise when you're working from home. Then again, it is true that life in the 21st century is way more complicated than ever before. And there are so many different kind of things that we have to do, that we want to do, so many roles that each of us is playing on a day-to-day basis. And so, yes, we do need to structure our day in order to make sure that we are on top of everything. And the best way I know to create structure without the 9 to 5 paradigm, the way that's been working for me and for many others, is to chunk the day to distinct blocks of time and to attach a specific time frame to each block. So for example, let's say I need to do this amount of work today. So I'll decide that in the next 40 minutes, I'll do this part. Or that in the next hour and a half, I'm going to try and do this part. And by the way, I do tend to use those specific time frames. 40 minutes is for simple stuff, and the 90 minutes is for stuff that needs more solving and immersing yourself in. So you may have completely different preferences, and that's fine. But I would recommend having some kind of standard measure that you use more or less regularly. I think it makes planning easier, and also it just feels more like there's a real structure in place, if you know what I mean. And then the trick is to really make sure in that time frame that you're not doing anything else as much as possible. Just turn off all distracting elements, anything that could beep at you and take your attention away, and just race forward and take on the challenge, really take it on of meeting that micro deadline that you just gave to yourself. It's almost like beating a level in a video game, right? It's a little challenge like that. And then there's a sense of satisfaction in making those little private deadlines, which is mentally important when you work by yourself for an extended period of time. Okay? Guys, before I go into the second tip, if this way of thinking so far makes sense to you, and if you feel this is helping, there's a link in the description that'll take you to a collection of resources that I put together for you. It has videos, PDFs, worksheets, basically everything that I could think of that has to do with chunking your work down to smaller bits, which is what we were just talking about. Needless to say, it's all free for you to download and enjoy, and it will help you navigate through some of the creative challenges right now, but also in the future when things calm down a bit, because workflow is about way more than just working from home. It's a whole approach to the creative process, right? So, finish watching this and then do click on that link and go have a look. Now, moving on. Tip number 2. Tip number 2 is something I find really, really helpful, and that's to schedule meetings with other people during the day. And whether it's a Skype call with a friend or with a client or a webinar that you attend, or even just setting a specific time for dinner with your family, whatever it is, as long as it involves other people and a specific time frame that's set in advance, it'll do the trick. And what it does, I find, because plans with other people are just harder to shift around than plans you make with yourself, if I have 2 or 3 of those appointments spread throughout my day, it creates kind of a firm backbone to my schedule. And it's just easier to plan my time blocks in between those preset anchor points, right? And it's way easier to follow through as well, because instead of having to be disciplined for 16 hours straight, the whole day, now I only have to be disciplined in smaller 3 to 4 hours chunks, and that's way easier. And by the way, there's also an advantage in those meetings interrupting my workday, because they're forcing me to take my mind off of what I've been working on, at least for a while. And then when I come back to it, I usually see my work more objectively. And that really helps me not to get lost in my own head. And this is a real thing. I often come back from a meeting like that with an almost ready-made solution to something I've been struggling with before the break. Or perhaps more importantly even, I could notice a problem that I completely missed before. And that happened many, many times. Now, speaking of walking away, tip number 3, and the last one for this video, is to always try to walk away from your work with just a little bit of something left undone. And what I mean by that is, look, inertia is a real thing. It's just way harder to start something than it is to continue something, right? Did you experience that? Think of doing dishes. You may postpone it, you may procrastinate over it, especially if there's a whole pile of dishes in there, right? But once you start, isn't it true that it's kind of hard to stop, in the middle, right? So when you have your, say, 40 minutes block that you're doing on a specific task, if you take your break just before the task is done, then when you get back to it, you're not starting from scratch. You're not starting on a whole new pile of dishes, so to speak, right? You're just washing that very last plate. And that thought of that immediate satisfaction of finishing something, at least to me, is a good motivator. But then, like with the dishes, once I'm already in, once I'm at my desk doing work, it's just way easier to continue straight into the next 40 minutes block. So, just to summarize, here are my 3 tips for staying productive and sane when working from home. Tip number 1, chunk your day to standardized blocks of time. Tip number 2, create a firm skeleton for your day by scheduling meetings with other people. Tip number 3, try to finish each block of time with something small and simple left undone. Okay, these are the tips I thought would be the most important ones for people who aren't used to working from home. At least those are the ones that don't require a huge setup in terms of explaining the workflow approach and the principles. Now, if you're interested in going just a bit deeper, the collection of resources I mentioned earlier will give you that. Again, the link is in the description. If you think this video was helpful, it would be nice if you could do this. And if you're interested in watching future videos with more advice about working from home and about the workflow in general, then do this and that. And yeah, I hope this helps. Stay safe, focus on being productive because it will keep you sane and positive. And let's all try to just make the most out of a difficult situation. Thanks for watching.